Okay, I think it is 10 or it's 11:10, 9, it's 10:10. We're good to go. Am I good to go? Long Winter, give me the thumbs up. Someone's going to give me, oh, excellent. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Allison. I am your moderator for this, and welcome, by the way. I'm your moderator this morning for this panel titled Building Equitable Trade Routes. So welcome to everyone. And before we get started, what I would like to do is let you know that I'm acknowledging that I'm zooming in from my home in Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I pay my respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who've lived here for 12,000 years in what is now known as Pictou County, Nova Scotia. So this land is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship between Mi'kmaq people and the British Crown. And those treaties didn't deal at all with surrender of land, but rather recognized the sovereignty of the people who've lived here for 12,000 years and created the terms for an ongoing relationship. And I honor those treaties with gratitude for a Mi'kmaq stewardship of the land and the water, past, present, and future. And I commit to upholding the treaties and signaling my commitment to that. I've donated a portion of my fee today to Indigenous Child and Family Caring Society, which is led by Cindy Blackstock, who's still fighting the federal government to get them to pay already court-ordered compensation for Indigenous children, which is crazy. Anyway, I am, and we're all of us here today, treaty people. Waliok, thank you very much. So I would like to get started, if I could, first of all, by mentioning people out there in Zoom land. We do have an interpreter. So there's a live transcription. If you need, so we're speaking English today, but we're joined by some French-speaking folks. So if you require interpretation, it's available to you. I think you just click the CC at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a CC live transcript happening if you need to hear that. So thank you very much. All right, so let's start with a round of introductions for our panelists, and thank you everybody for being available today to have a conversation with us. As I see them, as they're appearing on the screen, I'm going to start over here with Svea. If you could just introduce yourself in one sentence.
Hi everyone, I'm Svea and I'm a stage and tour manager.
Great.
Very simple.
Now I'm going over this way, and that's Diane. Oh, unmute there, Diane. On t'entend pas. No, I'm sorry.
Voilà, c'est bon, vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you. Hello, everyone. I will speak French, if you don't mind, because school was hard for me. My English isn't great. My name is Diane. I am a trans activist. I am a DJ. And today I want to speak about politics and about parties as well.
Okay. Directly under Diane, according to my screen, we have David Click Cox.
Hi, nice to be here today. Nice to see everybody. I'm not actually in the same room as Alana. We look like we're in the same room, but we're not. I'm a artist manager, consultant in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and been in the music business for about 30 years. So I have lots to say.
Great. Thank you. And that leaves last, but far from least, Alana.
Thank you, Allison. My name is Alana Stewart. So my one sentence might be a little bit long, but my name is Alana Stewart. I identify as a music artist. I'm a singer, songwriter, producer in Bonjay, a dance hall hybrid duo, as well as a vocalist in the Queer Songbook Orchestra. And I've become what I call an accidental academic or an independent scholar that does research, industry research and cultural research on this nebulous term diversity and how it impacts how we work, who gets to work and why not, as well as looking at innovation in socially marginalized groups. So who are on the fringes due to class, race, gender, sexual orientation, and how do we engage with the cultural production, the music, the ideas that often sustain music industries. And I'm happy to be here.
I am so happy you are here. In fact, you should be moderating this panel. So great. It's awesome to have all of you here. The questions that Alana was just, that she's researching are many of the questions I think that we're going to touch on, hopefully today. It's going to be short, but hopefully a little bit sweet and hopefully a little bit challenging too, because if we're all going to be giving up a portion of our Saturday, I hope that we have a chance to share some good ideas and to learn something from each other. That's the goal. We're not going to solve all the problems right here, but at least maybe we can have a good exchange of ideas. That said, I wanted to start with a couple of, let's say, blanket statements. Okay, so raise your hand if you agree with the following statements, and you know, maybe you don't, but let's start here, and this will maybe give us a base to launch this conversation from. So bold statement number one: the music industry is built on and fueled by exploitation. Hands up. Yeah, we're all on board for that. Okay. Said exploitation hits harder on some groups of people based on dimensions of identity. For example, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, disability. Do we all agree with that? Hits harder on those people. Yes. Okay, good. We're all on board. So it seems that we have a shared understanding of that basic, the basic issue of exploitation in the music industry. But do we have a shared understanding of how we can move forward and how we learn to prioritize or dial down or act in solidarity on those different issues? I guess the question that I'm asking is, do you think that we can have a shared understanding of how to eliminate exploitation in the music industry? Is that achievable? There's sort of like this, like, So let's start somewhere. And if it's all right, I'd like to start with Alana. Alana, I know that you've done a lot of research and work and thinking and practicing in and around Jamaican music. And it strikes me that there's an incredible disparity between the global popularity of that music versus ownership of the music itself, and of power in the industry and representation in the industry and among decision makers of people who are creators or entrepreneurs in Jamaican music. Can you tell me a little bit about how you see the relationship between that and that fundamental state of exploitation of the music industry? What's the connection?
Well, I feel like you raised some good questions that will lead to an automatic yes, mostly because of how we understand this word exploitation. And I think that there's an automatic weighted negative connotation to the term exploitation. But when I think of the term in its literal sense, it's like, how do we use, how do we disseminate, and how do we benefit from a certain idea? Benefiting from an idea isn't necessarily or inherently bad. Using an idea, I don't think is necessarily or inherently bad, but I think the ways in which certain ideas from groups are exploited, used, and benefited from, I think that's the issue. And so I just, I want to bring that up because I don't want to assume that, because I don't think the solution is to not use not touch Jamaican music or to not benefit from it. I think that when we look at Jamaican music, and I think that that's a great microcosm for how can we explore um, more mutually beneficial exchanges. When we look at Jamaican music, I think about its global cultural impact, its creation of reggae, its creation of dub, of dancehall, of rocksteady, of ska, and all the subgenres that inspired around the world from this tiny island that has the population around the size of Toronto. But then I look at the cultural power of Jamaica versus the economic prosperity of Jamaica, and that's when I start to question, or how are we fairly exploiting? Are we fairly using and benefiting from Jamaican music culture? And so I think Jamaican music history is such a great microcosm because there is such a glaring disparity between how well known Jamaican culture is. And when I think about culture, I think about the sounds, I think about the food, I think about the fashion, I think about the ways of being, all of that. I mean, we know what jerk chicken is. When I went to a seaside restaurant on the coast of the Adriatic in Croatia, outside of speaking Croatian, our common understanding was Jamaica. When this person asked where my dad was from, they said Bob Marley. How did Bob Marley's name get from Jamaica to Croatia? Such is the power and such is the global influence of Jamaican music. Now, if I ask this person, do you know a Jamaican person? Or sorry, if I ask the Croatian man, do you know a Jamaican person outside of Bob Marley? I don't know how much people engage with Jamaican society, how much we value the social norms and the customs, the intellect, the innovative thinking of Jamaican society and people versus the cultural artifacts that we engage with. And I think that that is the discrepancy that we should be exploring. I think in our relation, the discrepancy or the disparity between how we value Jamaican ideas versus Jamaican people. In there are some in that relationship, I think we need to interrogate that relationship. And if we look at it a little bit more closely, then we'll understand how these ideas are being exploited and why those benefits aren't getting back to, or the economic benefits aren't getting back to Jamaican people. And so that's why I'm fascinated. Also, I love dancehall because dancehall is like the baddest and the wickedest sound ever. And my father is Jamaican. But it was only until, and I'll be short because I'm aware of time, but to offer some context, I went to Jamaica for the first time only 5 years ago. And I've been spending about half my time there ever since. And I think about my position as a Black woman in the music industry in Canada and how my ideas might be exploited versus how I'm treated. But then I also think about myself as a Canadian when I go back to Jamaica, and I think about my positionality, my position of privilege with the university degree, with grants and the funding to be able to go there and live a certain way when I'm interacting with Jamaican musicians. And I think about my own responsibility of how I'm carrying Jamaican music ideas between Canada and Jamaica. And so even as a Black woman, even in the body that I have, there is a responsibility in how I engage with this culture, even if I can say that it is mine. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. There is so much to unpack in that, but what I'm interested in specifically, and I'm going to throw this over to Svea. You spoke about what you're trying to understand is the why in that gap between, you know, the almost universal embracing of Jamaican music and the lack of kind of real connection with the people and the culture and the lack of empowerment there. And that's the why for you. Similar question for Svea. Tell us a little bit about what you've been working on and what you think is the why those gaps exist. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Well, that's a very difficult question. But the why is that is mostly, I mean, since I started, I've only seen men on stage, and it's the same in labels, and it's the same everywhere. And it's mostly white men, cis men. I don't know if I can say that in English. So I guess the question for them about minorities and stuff like this is not a priority. So as long as these people, these men, are in charge, and that there is no parity and equality in the like the decisions decisions making, I think that will be always a problem. And that's actually what I've been working on with my association that I created 2 years ago. Because as a woman working on stage, obviously I noticed that I was always alone, especially on tour. So I decided to create a recruitment platform dedicated to women and gender minorities, marginalized people. Sorry. Because I really believe that parity is the key to change, to global change. But I also realized that both men and women needed to deconstruct gender and racial prejudices. So now we're also focusing on providing free formations to raise awareness among professionals, and also help women feeling more confident about themselves, by providing like technicians for technical formations. So they come on stage and they know what to do. They don't think that they can't do it or whatever. I think we also really need to get confident again in what we are capable of doing. And that's it. I think.
Okay. Thank you. Diane, can you tell us quickly about your work and about the why of your work? And does it connect to what Alana is saying? And does it connect to where Svea is coming from?
Ton micro, Diane.
We don't hear you.
Vous m'entendez là? C'est bon?
Can you hear me now? Okay. What I wanted to say was that my work is very related to this whole political context, power relations, social relations. These things are still very present in society. We can't ignore these issues of exploitation, discrimination, consent, all of that. This is all very important to the public. And so how do we connect all this? My work is to try to apply these questions and to try to dismantle these issues. So domination, relationships between men and women, for example, or oppression of queer peoples, these are realities faced by people, just as exploitation is as well. Ever since I came out, I have to say that back in school, I started a project, a group project called O Positive, and I came out soon after. I found myself in a hetero, cis, white exploitation system, and I also saw a lot of color washing. And the interpreter apologizes, the sound is a little poor. There's also economic issues related to this when it comes to clubs, for example. Our philosophy in my organization is that sometimes we see almost like a mafia philosophy in this industry. There's a lot of very strong demands to always make a profit and to always have money, but we don't get paid very well. So these are all the issues that I'm working on today. The party scene needs to help people face these issues, and we need to have responsible relationships with our people. Most of this industry is full of white men that are 50, age 50 and plus, and we see a lot of exploitation when it comes to copyrights as well. When it comes to these artists, there's also a big wage gap between women and men in this industry. We see DJs having a wide wage gap. So this salary issue applies to artists as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I have the right transcript running. Do I? But anyway, I was following the transcript and it seemed a little odd. But Diane, thank you for that. I think you're speaking a little bit about economic power.
Merci, Diane. Je pense
an important piece that's missing, for queer artists in particular, and well, I mean, for all marginalized artists, the lack of access to economic power is a significant issue. Okay, Click, I'm going to go over to you for a second because you're somebody who has been in the industry for 30 years, as you said, and you have a depth of experience in North America, but also in Europe. Have you noticed, or can you speak to a different kind of understanding of the artist experience and the artist management experience for you as a Black artist manager who manages Black artists between Canada and between France? And if you have experienced some differences in attitude around that, especially the conversation around equity and inclusion, what do you think that is? What is that? What can you share with us about that?
I think a lot of it comes down to changing conditioning. I think that's a huge part of issues is the conditioning that people have that is even subconscious. Sometimes to me, it's not the blatant racism, it's the undertone racism that's the worst. It's the ones that have ignorance and don't even know what they're doing that is wrong. And I think that there's a lot of areas in terms of barriers that people put up in their own areas, in the industry, that make it difficult for people to advance. But there's another thing that I always notice is, it's funny. It's, an artist that could be doing the exact same thing in Brazil or in Germany or in the UK or France or wherever it is. It could be two of the same artists, an artist in Canada and an artist in those spaces, doing the exact type of music, look the same. But it seems like there's like this support for something that is not from your own back home. Like an artist that is coming into the territory because they're from an international space gets more support than their own artists in their own territory. And I've noticed this from having conversations with artists and different, when I go on tours and I meet a band that's like similar and ask them what their experience is like back home, I can relate because I'm like, hey, I don't get that same support back home either. I get more support leaving than I do in my own backyard. And I find that very interesting. And I think that has something to do with our consciousness and the way that people consume and this conditioning of thinking like, there's all these barriers and I don't know what to do with something, or like it's kind of baffling to me at times. And I think there needs to be some sort of enlightenment in a revolutionary way. And what I mean by revolutionary way is sometimes you got to call it out. You really, at the same time, you can't waste all your energy, you know, fighting and trying to knock down doors that are basically gonna just rebuild up. You know what I mean? You knock down the door, they just build up the door again. You know what I mean? Versus like building our own houses, building our own stages, unifying with other people that have the same likely mind and want to build. And the internet and technology has actually made that way better for us to actually have a way more impact, to be heard and seen. And that's why I think that you're seeing a lot more and hearing a lot more people speak up and hearing their voices because of that. Before you didn't see that or hear that. And when you did, it was like, what did they say? So that's like some of my experiences. I've realized is like going, my artist Sate has been to France like 7 tours in the last several years. And just the acceptance and the support we've received there is like 10 times more than we've gotten in our own backyard in Canada, which just baffles me at times. But yeah, that's a little something that how I feel about things.
You said something about there's sort of people like a sort of a bigger movement that you feel like is starting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of any kind of international or kind of cross-cultural solidarity efforts around changing the conversation?
I haven't seen like an international play in terms of like unification of a lot of different organizations and spaces that are doing the same type of work to the degree that I would like to. Mm-hmm. But everywhere you look, there has been some sort of building of an outcry against injustices, exploitation, anything that's kind of like has put barriers up. There's definitely organizations that have been created and built and organizations that have had an enlightenment in the last couple of years, mm-hmm. Based on, I guess you could say, the pandemic has really made people kind of shift their mental to accept things differently. Mm-hmm. And I think it's definitely, I've seen, changes in organizations that already existed that didn't have, let's say, an equity statement, or didn't even, and what's interesting to me and where I see the change is like for years, I would go knocking on doors saying this needs to be done, that needs to be done. And it would kind of fall on deaf ears. Like people weren't really paying attention. And where I see the difference now is some of those same people are actually coming and asking for it and not having somebody asking them for that. So I think that that's where I see a little bit of a change happening. My worry is that it is just a quick little Band-Aid that they're like, oh yeah, it becomes performative. And I don't, that's where I believe the revolutionary tactics have to come into play. And I'm not about like letting a fire go out. I'm about, poking, keep that shit going. You know what I mean? So, that's how I feel about it.
Totally with you. Alana, building on what Click was just saying, it seems to me, because I also am not super aware of any kind of international efforts to, bring to light and to start coming up with solutions or, long-term strategies for changing that exploit, extract, plus exclude attitude of the industry. Is that the job of artists? And you're both an artist and a researcher and somebody who's, somewhat embedded at the heart of the industry at this point. Is it the job of artists? Is it the job of industry organizations? Is it the job of governments? Who's best placed to start building international solidarity around systemic change?
Well, I think, okay, so I think simply put, the main message of what I'm about to say is think about this as a relationship. Instead of thinking about it as a big abstract system, think about the fact that you're a human interacting with another human. How do you interact with the humans in your present day life, right? Um, in your partnership, can you recall moments of feeling respected or feeling seen or feeling held? In the music industry, what are ways in our workplace that you can create those same feelings or mirror those same healthy dynamics in your relationship? So instead of thinking about it as like dismantling the system, just like what is the system? We say it's cisgendered white men, so do we dismantle all cisgender? It's just too big, you know, and it's just easy to push away that idea because it feels impossible. But if we just think about it as like, how do you engage with humans respectfully, you know, and just abide by the don't be an asshole rule, then it becomes a lot simpler and more, you know, relatable. So I don't know whose job it is, but I will say that a couple things come to mind as I've been hearing Svea and Dan and Click and everybody speak. Is one, I think that thinking about Jamaican people and the innovators that have come up with so many wonderful music genres, when I think about women in tech, when I think about the queer community and the broader music culture that the queer community has shaped. I think that first we need to recognize that these people and these groups are empowered. And I think that we need to shift our perception of these groups as like lowly people in the music industry that without certain resources, we need to like, we're not charitable organizations as Black people, as women, as queer people, as differently abled people. So I think recognizing the agency and power that already exists in those groups, then it becomes a responsibility of everybody to foster that power and to clear the pathway of benefits that come from that power. I think in recognizing that power, then it shifts the question from like, how do we fix it as a way of like, how do we save these groups? They don't need saving. All the ideas that have come from Black people, queer people, women in music demonstrate that we already have the resources that we need to succeed in the music industry. I think that I think that I think part of the issue is in the resources that we value. We concentrate so much on money and think of money as we recognize money as power, but I think that ideas are resources. I think that methodologies and techniques are resources, and these groups are rich in that. I think when we're looking at building more mutually beneficial exchanges is to make sure that, I think that word extraction is more accurate, Allison, is that as we are engaging in trading ideas and methodologies and techniques, that the economic returns are as equally and openly accessed as the ideas are. It's a basic idea, but I think the tenet of what I'm trying to say is, rather than thinking about it as this big systemic issue, of really grounding it in first recognizing the power that exists in certain groups, recognizing that we value certain resources more than we do other resources. And I think that the dynamics of those relationships, that informs how we engage with people. So instead of thinking about it as like, here's a strategy or here's a policy, I think that all of that helps. But I think at the end of the day is like, what is the nature of our relationships of these people that we're engaging with in the music industry? And I think that that relationship is so important because music is such an informal, network dependent industry, that just the human relations, like how do we relate from human to human, is not a romantic or naive idea. That is how the music industry operates. So again, how do we recognize certain people? How do we value certain innovators? And I think that a key tool that anybody can use is credit. So how do we credit people for the certain ideas? And this can come in different forms. So I think about a song featuring an artist. If you're named as a featured artist, suddenly you're open to increased mechanical royalties just by having your name associated with the song, just by having your name associated with the idea that you contributed to the music industry. I think about co-presentation. So my band Bonje were invited by the Canada Council for the Arts to perform in Côte d'Ivoire last year at the MASA festival, which is kind of like the South by Southwest of West Africa. Now we were invited because we are presenting an innovative hybrid of dance hall music, right? We're going to West Africa to represent this Canadian sound, but also this Jamaican diasporic sound. So when they said, is there anybody that you want to bring with you? We brought our friends Equinox, a forward-thinking dance hall collective from Jamaica, because we felt that it was important that we're not the only ambassadors to the dance hall sound, but we're also bringing folks from our cultural roots to say, this is who we are, but this is where it came from, you know? And I think that that's just as simple as sharing the invitation. That's not reliant on systems of dominance to change. I don't have to wait for these systems of dominance to change. I just have to consider, you know, sharing, which is such a basic human tool, you know, and then suddenly, and it's not like, oh, we're gonna give you lowly Jamaicans from poor Jamaica. Like Jamaica has like Porsche and BMW dealerships. It's not completely like a ghettoized country, but it was less about like, I'm going to give you this opportunity. It was more, I'm going to recognize your contribution to the sound that gave me this opportunity, and I'm going to share this opportunity with you. So I'm just going to wrap up by saying, I think we need to consider how we engage with people on a human to human level, and think about what kind of relationship would you want for yourself in your personal life? How can we mirror that in the music industry? And in general, just don't be an asshole.
You know what? I think that's so valuable, Alana, and thank you for like literally bringing that down to earth in a way that's actually achievable and that reminds us of our sort of human responsibilities in the world. I'm guilty of being a 50,000 foot view person, and so I totally appreciate your words on that. I want to bring it because we don't have a ton of time. In fact, we almost have none. So ever so quickly over to Svea and also Diane. In what Alana was saying, I think that there's a lot of value in saying, you know, rather than thinking of our issues of lack of representation and lack of power and so on as being these giant sort of impossible systems, that there's something in there that's just about, as Click says in the chat, don't be an asshole. Is that a useful message for you in the work that you're doing? And is there a way that you tell me about that?
Yeah, it talks to me definitely, because like in technique on stage, as I said, we're few women, for example. So it's funny to say that we're not really into solidarity. And, you know, it's not, as I said earlier, I think that both men and women need to deconstruct how we learn to survive in this industry, because when obviously if you're the only girl trying to make it on stage, you became a survivalist. So what I'm trying to create with my association, and also me myself, like what I discovered is sorority, and I'm trying to help women and in order to help myself also on stage. I think that just talk to each other and help each other and just stop being against each other because we're the only ones is not the idea. Actually, we really have to start supporting each other to make a change. And that's my new fight, I guess, under the technical world.
Dan, can you comment on that in a similar way?
Oui, alors ce que je peux dire aussi là-dessus, c'est
Yes,
moi
I'd
je
like to say that I fully agree. I don't want to add too many things because we need time. But we want to, in order for those things to work well, we have to deconstruct. We have to sit at the table, make sure that minorities are heard. Minorities have to deconstruct so we can build something new. So the majority white cisgender has to recognize that the behaviors have to change. And if we don't do that, we won't be able to success. First, we have to be independent, but bring those questions collectively. Therefore, it doesn't seem, it looks like a global movement. It's well thought and it has been, and it's important compared to the hardship.
Thank you, Dan. So it's now 10 to, sorry, I'm an hour ahead of you guys, but I think we're actually out of time, which is super irritating because I feel like we're just getting started. And so I don't really have any, I mean, I guess I'll invite anybody who feels like they've got a burning comment that they really want to make before we say farewell. I invite you to do so now. I don't think we have time for any questions from outside, and I'm sorry about that. But fellow panelists, does any of you have something that you really want to convey right now before we get cut off?
I just wanted to echo Svea's point, and you were asking earlier, Allison, whose responsibility it is to make change. And I just want to encourage artists or people who are socially marginalized to recognize within ourselves how we internalize some of these systems of oppression, but also to recognize our own power and to not believe that our position in the music industry is reflective of our value and our worth, and that we don't have to wait until somebody else values us. That's why we're all here, is because we created our own opportunities. You know, Svea didn't need someone to say to her, I'm a skilled technician. She was on that stage because she did the learning and she is skilled. What she did was she recognized her own skill set and her own power and created Banshee. And I think we've all done that. And so I think, you know, looking inward is important to understand how we can recreate some of these systems within ourselves, but you know, how our own practice, our existence, our mere existence is a solution to some of these issues.
Say one thing is I think a lot of us here are probably self-employed, and I think that it can be very challenging for people who aren't, that work in spaces that fear speaking out will actually you know, hurt them in their careers. And I think that all I can say to that is bravery is a special thing. And it takes a sense of bravery to speak out. And if you see something that doesn't feel right, because you know just within the pit of your soul that this is not right, don't sit back, because the actions that you make, you might not end up at the career at the space that you're in, but you'll end up in a way better space. You know what I mean? And you know, I echo Alana and Sevia's remarks in regards to, like, it's our duty to actually open the door and make sure that women, that marginalized, trans, queer, are all opened and let in. And it's our duty as men and each other, just as human beings, to look out for one another.
That's awesome. And with the dying seconds of this panel, maybe I can just quickly synthesize what, Because at the beginning, what I really hoped is that we would land in a place where we could understand this is what our shared language is around equity and inclusion. And I think maybe we got there a little bit. And thanks very much to Alana for bringing it back to the human element, which is, you know, whether or not there are international organizations that are one day going to, you know, form giant coalitions in solidarity and start trying to undermine, you know, the power structures of the music industry, et cetera, that's one thing. And actually, I think that that's valuable work, and that's work that somebody should be doing. But I also think that as humans, we can meet each other in a way that's collaborative, that's mutually beneficial, that's kind, that creates opportunities. And that's what music is for, I'm pretty sure. Right? So thank you all very much for participating in this conversation. Again, I feel like it was too short, but it was a great pleasure to hear each of you speak. Je vous remercie fortement. Et j'espère qu'on se
Thank
reverra
you
bientôt.
very much. And I hope that we'll get to see you soon. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, everyone.